from the article that is coming. That's what at least one financial expert is saying. Charles Brown of CB3 Financial says,
one of the brilliant moves that Kmart has done is to partnership with Facebook in these e-gift certificates, so you can actually...
Of government mismanagement. Charles Brown is the president of CB3 Financial Group. He joins us this morning from Chicago.
Significantly dropping. Basically, this is the year of the consumer.
Believe that they're capable of managing anything?
Well, it's sort of like handing the keys to the chicken coop to two wolves.
Good evening, everyone, from Chicago. It's Thursday, September 24th. I'm your host, Charles Brown, Portfolio Manager with CB3 Financial. We're so glad you're with us tonight in this historic time. Little did we know at last week's episode that the next day we would lose one of our Supreme Court justices, and the world has pretty much been turned topsy-turvy since that time. So we're glad you're with us. Tonight's top three, Corona America. The vaccines are getting closer, and we're going to take a look back. Stocks are still off their September 2nd highs, and in fact, the NASDAQ is in an all-out correction, which means more than 10%, although it came off of that today. And then RBG and the 2020 elections, not just the presidential election will be affected, but the Senate races could well be affected on a multiplicity of factors, which we'll be covering over the next several weeks. But for tonight, let's get right on it. The coronavirus continuing to wreak havoc, and yet I still highlight, third week in a row now, the number of deaths in 3 digits and not 4 or 5. We did cross 200,000 deaths in the United States. I'm sure you've seen that number, but the number of deaths per day continues to stay in the 3 digits. And that's what we need to see to get this epidemic finally behind us. Moderna and Pfizer have set different efficacy bars. So I have a few less slides tonight. I want to spend a little more time on each one. Many Americans are concerned that these companies are rushing to get these through in what's called the emergency approval from the FDA. And both Moderna and Pfizer have taken this unusual step of publishing the protocols. So they're not keeping them close to the vest. They're publishing so the rest of the medical community can see them and not necessarily offer their opinions, but they're being very transparent about it simply because the timeline is so compressed to get this done. So this $18 billion initiative trying to get the world behind this. So 156 countries and territories. However, the U.S. is not on board with this $18 billion rollout initiative simply because the United States is withdrawn from the World Health Organization. Now, Russia and China are also not part of this because they've already issued emergency licenses. So you wonder how much testing they did. But that's the state of things here with this vaccine. People are just literally tripping over themselves to try to get this out because, well, we have a pandemic. Absolutely. I think we jumped a couple slides ahead. Let's go back here. So, okay. So Johnson & Johnson continues now a 60,000 subject phase 3 clinical trial called Ensemble. Now it's a single shot COVID-19 vaccine. Trying to evaluate its immunogenicity, 7 syllables, word of the day, okay? In other words, is this vaccine able to fully treat people with just 1 dose? That's what they're trying to determine. The participants have to be 18 years old, I should say, but they also have to be over, or many of them, I should say, are over the age of 60. And that's really important because we have this comorbidities. That was word of the day maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. People that don't necessarily die from COVID-19, but with COVID-19. So the amount of testing that's going on, both on trying to ascertain what's causing this, plus the vaccines themselves, is really pretty astounding. The number of trial sites for this Johnson & Johnson Test is the U.S., Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, South America. Notably missing from this are any Asian sites or any European sites. I'm sure there's a reason for that. I don't have it for you tonight, but I'm going to be watching it. So I thought it would be a good idea, and this is pretty early in the program to actually start a video, but I was able to find this, and this is going to go back to when COVID-19 first started, and I thought it would be interesting to just sort of get a perspective. It's 6 months now. It's every bit of 6 months, maybe a little bit longer than that. And what has happened in this time frame? What have we learned? And what do we still need to learn to put this pandemic behind us?
In mid-January, a hospital in Everett, Washington announced a patient had tested positive for a deadly new strain of coronavirus, the cause of the yet-to-be-named disease, COVID-19. It was the first reported case in the United States. Concerning, but still a relatively small threat compared to the growing outbreak in China. But fast forward 8 months, and the United States has the most recorded coronavirus cases in the world, with a death count that has reached 200,000. So how did it spread in the United States? Looking back, public health experts have pointed to a series of missteps and miscalculations in the U.S. response. A response that has been polarizing and painful, and launched the country into a deadly game of catch-up with a pandemic that has yet to subside. The first major action the United States takes against coronavirus is to restrict travelers coming from China. The first case in Everett, Washington, and a second case in Chicago, both were from travelers who had recently returned from the Chinese province at the heart of the outbreak. But the virus was also circulating in Europe around this time, a second front of infiltration that will go overlooked for several weeks. In early February, U.S. efforts center on how to safely screen and repatriate Americans returning from Asia, like those quarantined on the Diamond Princess cruise liner in Japan. This outbreak is the largest outside of mainland China and shows how rapidly the virus can spread if left unchecked. Public health experts say that a widespread deployment of testing in the U.S. is essential for containment, but test kits sent by the CDC to public health labs across the country proved to be faulty, and the labs are told they shouldn't use them. The FDA bars independent labs from using tests they've developed themselves, and health officials say the public should not wear masks. As the virus silently spreads across the country, experts warn of a testing bottleneck that can't keep up with demand, despite the president's reassurances.
Anybody that wants a test can get a test. That's what
I would just say that we start.
As the CDC expands the criteria for who can be tested, infection hotspots appear across the country. One emerges in New Rochelle, New York. The National Guard is deployed to establish a 1 square mile quarantine zone within the New York City suburb. But by that point, patients and their family members had already traveled to several locations throughout the metro area, including a synagogue and a school. The nation's top infectious disease expert tells Congress the country's testing strategy isn't working.
The system is not really geared to what we need right now, what you are asking for. That is a failing.
In mid-March, the coronavirus outbreak is declared a national emergency, as the country comes to grips with the fact that the lack of testing has made containment more difficult. Shortly after, 6 Bay Area counties enact the first stay-at-home orders in the country, closing all non-essential businesses. The entire state of California soon follows, preceding a cascade of 42 state closures over the next 3 weeks. After initially saying people shouldn't wear masks, the CDC reverses course in early April, recommending they be worn in public, guidance that is highly politicized as Americans become split on the severity of the outbreak. The perils of the virus are on full display at the outbreak's epicenter in New York City. ICUs are overwhelmed as officials try to rapidly increase hospital capacity to treat patients and confront the mounting number of deaths.
I'm tired of walking into rooms and your patient's dead. You just walk into a room and there's a dead body there. I'm tired of calling families and telling them that news.
In less hard-hit areas, Americans protest stay-at-home orders, often without masks, to compel governors to reopen their economies. By the end of May, economic pressures have driven every state to ease lockdowns, despite health experts saying only 3 states meet reopening guidelines set by the Trump administration. These guidelines call for extensive testing and contact tracing, but states have a tough time implementing these measures for a few reasons. First, testing still isn't widely available. One analysis in late May concludes that 53% of U.S. counties don't have a testing site. And this lack of testing disproportionately impacts minority communities. Second, reopening states don't have the resources to trace infections. A recent analysis finds that Florida's Department of Health needs 33,000 contact tracers. The state currently has just over 2,300. Officials warn that bars, restaurants, and summer gatherings are ground zero for infections, as asymptomatic young people drive a surge in new cases. Protesters demonstrate against police violence and institutionalized racism, as the virus continues to disproportionately affect minority communities. And by the end of June, the epicenter of the outbreak shifts to the south and west, as cases spike in Florida, Texas, Arizona, and California, and forces some states to roll back or slow down reopenings.
We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around, and so I am very concerned.
In early July, the surge in U.S. coronavirus cases and demand for testing strained the ability of pharmacies and labs to deliver timely results to consumers. By mid-July, 13 states see new infections rise by over 20% compared to the previous week, and Florida sets a new single-day record of over 15,000 new cases, as the country debates whether schools should reopen in the fall.
I think it's important to realize that it's in the public health best interest of K through 12 students to get back in face-to-face learning.
U.S. coronavirus cases jumped by nearly 2 million over the course of the month, as the virus spreads to parts of the country that had been spared early in the pandemic. By the end of July, governors continue to wrestle with whether or not to reopen their economies, while more than half order residents in their states to wear masks.
Any crowd in which you have people close together without masks is a risk, and I'll stick by that statement.
In mid-August, schools in several states close in-person learning after students and staff test positive for the virus. By the end of August, natural disasters such as wildfires and hurricanes ravaged some parts of the country, hampering efforts in testing and state reopenings. September brings expanded testing capacity beyond the sickest patients. COVID-19 patients aged 18 to 29 now make up the largest group tracked by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, though older patients or those with underlying health conditions are still most likely to die from the virus. In mid-September, U.S. officials are preparing states for the limited distribution of vaccines that could be available by the end of October, but some health officials predict the vaccine won't be available until later.
You're asking me, when is it going to be generally available to the American public so we can begin to take advantage of vaccine to get back to our regular life? I think we're probably looking at late second quarter, third quarter, 2021.
The coronavirus outbreak in the United States has proven difficult to manage, and so it's difficult to predict what will happen next. But public health experts say learning from the costly mistakes of the past 6 months may be crucial in plotting a path forward.
It's kind of hard to believe it's been 6 months, huh? And a lot has happened. So let's ask the question now, as this vaccine gets closer and closer to being a reality, will you take the COVID-19 vaccine? A, yes, right away. B, well, yes, but in 30 days or so. Yes, but not until next year, sometime in 2021. No, I don't trust the Rust timeline at all. E, I'm waiting for a while to consider. Any of these answers is fine, guys, so just be straightforward and put whatever you want there. I know we're on a 25-second delay here, so I'm going to see what's in the chat box while you guys are answering that. All right. At least when we first started this, we had multiple companies saying they're going to begin their trials. Now we have 3 or 4 at 30 to 40,000 people in their trials. Keith, no, I don't trust the Rush timeline. Yep, I hear you. Same with Debbie. Tommy's got an E. Christine, E. Tom, D. K. A or B. Okay. I guess it sometimes depends on where you are in the country, what your age is, and how much social interaction you have. A lot of D's on here. Hey, Doc, Dr. J, got a C there. Sometime in 2021. That's probably where I come down. Not that you guys ask, but that's probably, I have managed to stay healthy so far. We'll see how it lasts. Let's look at the U.S. economy. So as of today, NASDAQ now only up 19%. But hey, that's pretty good, because the S&P is up 0.5%. Now, you may remember we were up as much as 32% earlier, way back at the beginning of September. Dow Jones now negative again for the year. Russell down 13. So that gap, that 31% gap is still there between the NASDAQ and the Russell. It was a little larger in early September, but I'm showing you guys charts all the time, so I thought I would do a funny one here. So on March 26th, you see the little green face like seasick, right? And then we have a party because that one day we had an 11% gain, and then it looked like we were going to give it all back, and the sad face, and then it, jumps back up. And all these are, 1 or 2 days apart. And then the market goes back down again, and I can't really print the word that was said. And then the, oh gosh, with the eyeballs there with the X's. Anyway, I hope you guys get a kick out of this. That's what it's been like. And now we're just at this point where the face there with the purple head is, I can't believe, we're at where we are in the market on September 2nd, and then it's given a lot of that back. But it's the time of the year, just so you know, where the market, this is the 3rd worst week of the year. I had a client call me today and say, gosh, why is it so difficult right now? Well, September is the worst month of the year historically since 1950. And this particular week, the 3rd week of September, is the 3rd worst week of the year. There's one in July and there's one in October that are worse historically, all the way back to 1950. And yet the Chicago Fed president, Charles Evans, said he thinks the economy is 90% back. Well, that depends on what part of the economy you're in. I ate outside at a restaurant last night because they only had 6 tables inside and they were all taken. And that restaurant, I'm sure, would not, tell you that they're 90% back. In fact, one of the owners came out and asked how our meal was and thank you for being here. They had never done that in 3 years of me, patronizing them. But we're seeing the trend corroborated. I'm glad he says that, and certainly we want to, believe that that's where things are. Applications for unemployment. So I spent a lot of time here on unemployment. Notice that they're at a low. Now that forecast of 850, that reported this morning at 870, but that's really, really close. The trajectory continues to be down, and then there's the continuing claims. So the 2 pieces of data that we follow are what are initial claims, hey, I'm unemployed, I need to file for claims, and then people that are out of work that file continuing claims. That also is a number continuing to drop to the lowest level since April. It's not perfect, but the trajectory continues to be, as it has been all throughout the summer and now into the autumn, moving in our favor. I know you guys have sat with me and listened to all my stats on home buying, but it's so important because the consumer is 70% of GDP in the United States, and the biggest personal expenditure for consumer discretionary is housing. Okay, so existing home prices, this is the price paid for a home, 35% higher than in 2007 at the bubble peak. And there's no indication whatsoever that this buying spree is anywhere close to done. A lot of that is because the Fed has, again, played their hand and said, we're not raising rates until 2023. So what about the median sale price of existing homes in a recession? Well, you see in 2001 they went up. In 2008 they did not. The gray bars there are the 2 previous recessions. Well, in the current recession, in which we still are, and we won't know if we pulled out of this until we start to get the data in October, but you can see that home pricing has gone straight up straight up on the far right side of the chart there in this recession. New home sales in August, obviously we don't have the September data yet, haven't been this good since November of 2006, and they have not exceeded a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1 million new home sales, in 14 years. Specifically 1.011 million, and that's month over month, which is looking back a year. That's fabulous data. The key takeaway is that strong demand for new homes at more affordable price points, especially in the South, which is where a lot of the building is going on. Obviously, it slows down here in the North as the winter months come in. But because of this, you would expect this home builder optimism that I've been telling you about for the last 3 or 4 months, how it is coming out of the V, but still hasn't overcome the previous highs. Well, you can see now with the red dot that I put on the screen that in fact it has overcome and is at the highest point in more than a decade. Also very, very positive. What about homeowners equity? So are people just buying these homes and putting 1 or 2% down and they've got no equity? Actually, that's not true. Look at the equity. So what does this chart mean? U.S. homeowner equity in mortgage properties on a quarterly basis. Looking back to 2010, it's been pretty much straight up. And in fact, in 2020, we've got a nice little bump, meaning that the percentage of equity that the homeowner has versus what they owe the bank is rising even in a recession, even in this pandemic. It's great data. The opposite of this is the percentage of mortgages that that homes are worth less than their mortgage. Okay, we want that to come down, and in fact, that's exactly what's happening. Not by a ton in 2020, but it still has come down, and that's a positive. Okay, how about income? Well, we see that bump in income. All right, what's that bump in income? First of all, the blue line means projected. Obviously, I can't tell you what that's going to be for 2021, but that bump is the PPP, the Payroll Protection Plan, which issued tons and tons of checks to people. And the reason that comes back down is because that plan is now running out at the end of this month. And that's why we are waiting to see if Congress is going to do anything to fund that. Oh, and by the way, they have to vote on a new justice. And oh, by the way, so many of them are campaigning for re-election in now 39 days. So it is a crazy time in American politics. But they've really got to address this because people got used to this help, especially those that have not gone back to work. And at least the trajectory projects that the continuum of income will stay constant, and that's a good thing. So American households saw their best economic gains in half a century in 2019. Whether you like the president or not, he does have a pro-growth policy. Pro-growth means low taxes and low regulations, and that's been one of the hallmarks of President Trump's administration. Median household income grew by this stunning number of $4,400 in 2019. I had some of this data for you last week, but I'm expanding on it this week. The poverty rate reached an all-time low of 10.5%. Now you might say, well, gosh, that's still really high. Well, yes, it is, but it's the lowest on record, okay? Between 18 and 19, over 4 million Americans were lifted out of poverty. And the child poverty rate, which is even more important, I think, at a 50-year low. So this is while the pandemic is going on, guys, while it's in progress. So what about household and nonprofit organizations, their net worth? Well, you would think that that has dropped or leveled off. In fact, it's not done that. In fact, I'm going to drill down here and show you on this chart. Look carefully at the red bar, the blue bar. So it took a huge hit in the second quarter of 2020, but here in the third quarter, and of course it's red because it's projected, it's just made a dramatic turnaround. And this is consistent with the data that we've seen in other aspects and other areas of the economy, these what I'm calling jackknife changes in economic data. This one is one that I have not shown you before, but in April, 86% of people that had been laid off were expecting to go back to the same job. Well, only 37% did. 5% did return to the same job. Now 30%, so that's good. but 22 are not expecting to return to work at all. So that is a portion of the population that pretty much has just given up, and that is not good. So especially when you have this uncertainty with the market, the uncertainty with the presidential election, the uncertainty of what's going to happen socio-politically with this Supreme Court battle. You know, it's just a very uncertain time. That's why I'm bringing these to you every week. We've got to follow this data. The spending that I mentioned earlier, that extra $600 is expired for some people, but it's still expiring for others at the end of September. What has happened is people are spending less on apparel, so I guess that means less clothing, less Lady Gaga outfits or whatever. But restaurants, groceries, you know, pretty steady there. I do believe at some point Congress is going to have to figure out how to send at least another $1 trillion into the economy, which of course just adds to the debt. But for now, we just can't see this huge drop in this basically personal bailout income run out in September and not replenish it in some way. I showed you the Empire State Manufacturing Index last week. Remember, the Empire Strikes Back? Well, this is the Fed Richmond. This is Virginia. Manufacturing Index just rocketing up. Not back to 2017 levels, but I'm expecting the next time I show this to you, or at least in 2 months, that it will be. More positive data from the manufacturing sector. Of course, they're the second largest producer of GDP after consumer spending. Small business optimism, you saw the builders' optimism just off the charts, out the roof, basically. Not quite as high for business optimism, but still pretty strong. And I think that's a positive. It's coming up in the middle, again, as I say many times in these shows, during a recession, during a pandemic, and at least it's moving in the right direction. So guys, some of you got in touch with me this week and said, wow, we're kind of down in the portfolio a little bit. I said, like, well, okay, we had an enormous run. We had a good portion of that run in the summer. We had a substantial portion of that run in August, which is traditionally the third worst month of the year. We're now in the worst one, September. And so we're bound and due for somewhat of a pullback. I believe that we remain in the early stages of a bull market. I will not make you suffer through those two charts that I show you, it seems like every other week. But how else can we explain this move to a lifetime high on September 2nd? Well, the Dow climbed both years during the pandemic 1 century ago. It's just important that you do not confuse a healthcare crisis with a financial crisis. I've said that on several occasions and I stand by it now, okay? Do not confuse what is clearly a healthcare crisis. And yes, we do have socio challenges. I'm trying to choose my words carefully right now. We have other effects. I mean, the reason the market bumped up 200 points in the Dow today when Mitch Mitchell tweeted that, don't worry, we're going to have a peaceful transition. He was basically covering for the press's interpretation of President Trump's comment the night before. So all of these little hotbeds can make the market be very jumpy, and that's why the VIX is elevated and has been for months and months. Basically, we've been above 20 in the VIX. 20 is the alert level. We haven't even been to 20. We haven't been that low since February. So I'm not seeing that change. And 2020, of course, as you guys know, has already seen the quickest bear market, quickest recovery. All of this has happened since I started this program on March 12th. This is one of the most consequential elections. I should have just crossed through that and said, this is the most consequential election in my lifetime, without a doubt. And it's exacerbated by the situation with the Supreme Court opening, okay? So volatility is just not going to be ebbing at all. So the number one volatility reason this last week, of course, is the death of Justice Ginsberg. Now, many people around the country, those that are not in the Republican Party, are saying, well, is it too close? Should we even be electing a Supreme Court nominee that if the president puts one forward, as he says he's going to do on Saturday? The reality is that we have not had this short a window in 150 years, and yet there have been 29 election year appointees, and 90% of them have been confirmed. So, and again, I'm just going to give you the facts here, folks. What you hear from some people is says, well, we had Justice Scalia pass away, and President Obama nominated somebody, and you can see it here on the chart, 200 some days in front of the election, and he didn't get elected, so why should we rush on this one? And here's the reality. It doesn't really matter if we like it, and it doesn't really matter if it's fair. The Constitution says that the president shall nominate and the Senate will confirm or at least interview them. Well, that didn't happen, but there's no punishment for that. And the reality is, since 1792, when George Washington first took office, in a year where the party of either one, the Republican Party in this case, and the Senate is held by the Republican Party, a nominee is chosen and voted in because they have the votes. It's just not about fairness. It's about politics. And that's the reality. The press knows this. And if you guys didn't know it, now you do. The reason why this jurist is going to be made a part of the Supreme Court is simply because they have the votes. All right? If Chuck Schumer were running the show here, there is a 0 chance that this would have happened, because Schumer couldn't have made a nomination that he liked, because he can only work with a nomination that President Trump had. But I assure you, Chuck Schumer would have stopped that nomination from occurring. So how does this stand? Look at the dotted line. The required threshold is 50 votes. You're probably thinking, well, it needs to be 51. No, it just needs to be 50, because the president of the Senate is actually Vice President Mike Pence. And if there's a 50-50 tie, or, and you might not know this, if there's a 47-47, 48-48 tie, a tie of any number, then Vice President Pence will come in and break that tie. So where we stand right now is that we have some that are up for election in competitive races. These are Republicans. If there are 4 defections, look at the bottom left there, then it will be a block. If there are 4, that means there's only 49-4. But what could happen is that the 2 women that are senators in Maine and Alaska could vote present. And if they vote present, then that's not a vote against the nominee. And it's still fairly likely, especially with Mitt Romney saying that he will vote if it's a good candidate. So all of these things are being calculated, folks, and it's literally being played out in the market. Again, markets like stability. If they knew there was no way this jurist was going to be replaced, believe it or not, for the markets, that would be okay. Maybe not for political pundits, but it would be okay for the markets, because they would be certain that this wouldn't happen until January, February. As it stands right now, we have third quarter earnings coming out very soon, and this is very much in play and what's going to happen here. So in my opinion, it's going to be one of the 2 of these ladies. They're both very, very qualified. But why not look at the betting market and see who's most likely? If you did not know this, there are 2 well-known betting markets. You can wager 83 cents to earn $1 that Amy Coney Barrett will get the nomination. You can wager just 18 cents to win $1 for Barbara Lagoya. All right, and you can see just 1 or 2 cents for the other 3. They're not going to happen. And you may have thought, if you didn't know about this, that there's betting on sports, there's betting on horse races, there can't be betting on politics. Yes, there is, actually. And in fact, there's even voting as to whomever is chosen. When will that vote occur? Well, 72 cents. You got to pay 72 cents for that's a 28-cent payoff, that it's going to happen by November 3rd. And these are people that are betting millions of dollars. Not necessarily every individual is betting $1 million, obviously, but this isn't just chump change. Okay? November 3rd to January 2nd, 22 cents. This to me looks like the betting Americans, or from everyone around the world, is betting this is going to be voted on prior to the results being issued on November 3rd or November 4th. And not only that, a different betting entity, Predict It, allows you to wager on individual states. And if you're interested in this, mark it in the chat over here. I can give you more of these, or if this is boring you, then I won't. But look at the race in Florida. You could have paid 38 cents for the Republicans winning Florida, and right now that would be worth about 49 cents. If you had bet on the Democrats way back in June, you would have had to pay 60 cents, and that's only worth about 49 cents right now. So again, when people put their money where their mouth is, I tend to weigh it a little bit more heavily, but I wanted to spend a little time on this so you can just see. The stock market performance since 1928, the incumbent party has won nearly 90% of the time. All right, so if this market gets out of this funk, and according to the calendar, October can also be a very volatile month, but heading into November, that last week of October, is generally when things pick up. So if this market makes another lifetime high, it's probably almost a cinch for President Trump, except if they are also in the middle of a very contentious nomination for a Supreme Court justice. And I didn't know that last week. I've been bringing these individual states to you. So Arizona, Georgia, and Texas are the ones I'm focusing on this week. Notice that they're all on the right, although in 2016, Arizona moved conclusively closer to the left, but it still was a red state. It hasn't moved that much, despite the fact that you'll hear that Joe Biden's ahead by 8 points. You'll hear that Georgia is in play. Well, not according to this data from 538, which is pretty accurate. And then Texas also is moving to the center, but not enough to swing it to be a red state. Right now, most maps list it as a pink state, if you want to know that about Texas. So here we are. We have this nomination that's going to happen Saturday at 5 p.m. is the data that I'm hearing. And then we have a debate on Tuesday. And I'll be sure and watch Monday night. I'll bring you the very latest on what I think is going to happen. There is a portion of the betting market, I didn't put this on the screen, that thinks that there will be no debate, that it will be canceled at the last minute for one reason or another. I will be here on Monday, as I always am, telling you about that. But in the meantime, how does this vacancy affect the political field, and what does it mean for the election process?
I'll be submitting at 5 o'clock on Saturday the name of the person I chose for this most important of all positions. And I think we should go very quickly. You see the Republicans are very united.
Republicans in the Senate have coalesced with remarkable speed behind the idea pushed by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and President Trump that they should move rapidly to fill a Supreme Court vacancy created by the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to do so, in fact, before the November 3rd election.
I've indicated that what I intend to do is to proceed with the consideration process, and if a nominee actually reaches the floor, that I will vote based upon the qualifications of that nominee.
They're moving down this path despite the fact that 4 years ago, the Republican-controlled Senate refused to do the same thing when Democratic President Barack Obama tried to fill a Supreme Court vacancy in his last year in office. Only 2 Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, have declined to go along with this plan. So the question is, why this show of near unanimity now? Well, I think there are 3 factors at work here. The first is that this is an illustration that for Republicans and conservatives, filling court openings, particularly Supreme Court vacancies, is really a top priority, has been for a long time, seems to have been a higher priority for them in some ways than Democrats and liberals, and they're showing that now. You can see this, for example, in the reaction of Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee. He's retiring after this year, so he has no particular political reason to take one side or another in this debate, but he fell in line quickly behind the plan to move quickly to fill this seat and do it before the election if possible. So that's a sign that he really takes this seriously as an issue. Second, though, there's also a fear factor involved. Republicans in the Senate know that if they defy the president and defy Senator McConnell, they will be attacked publicly by the president. He has used that fear to keep discipline in the ranks for 3.5 years. It's still working for him now. And third, I think you're seeing among senators who are up for re-election this year a realization that this is a base mobilization election, an election in which the key is to excite your base, not to win over people from the other side or the middle of the spectrum. For them, the goal here is simply to make sure that their base back home is unified and excited and turns out in greater numbers, and the way to do that is to fall in line on a Supreme Court choice. You're seeing this, for example, in the reactions of Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado and Joni Ernst of Iowa. they're both up for re-election this year in swing states, where you might think that the smart political path for them would be to do something that would convince some Democrats and some independents to come their way, but they have in fact come in line behind this plan as well. That's a sign that for them, they know that base mobilization, keeping the core base energized and excited, is the key to getting over the finish line in a close race this year. So a lot of different factors, same result, Republicans are moving ahead.
I think that's really important to realize that basically, they're not gonna step aside on this. The Republicans are going to get this done if there's any way to get it done, and I understand their point on this. So, all right, let's have our question here. What's your current viewpoint as we approach this year's first debate? Trump will win the debate. A. B. Biden will win the debate. Well, those letters are wrong. Forgive me, but pretend that's a B, okay? C, neither Biden nor Trump will win the debate. Or D, I have no interest in this debate. And it's okay for you to put D, but not next week when I ask you, because then we'll be talking about the second and third debates. So answer A, Trump will win the debate. Answer B, not C, Biden will win the debate. C, neither Biden nor Trump will win the debate. D, I have no interest in this debate. We have an A from Tom. Now, you guys don't really need to think about this. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else? A, Trump. B, Biden. C, neither of them. D, I just don't have any interest in this debate. I just want to watch the confirmation hearings. We've got A. Christine, C. Neither will win the debate. Okay, Christine, that's good. A, but I don't think Biden will show. Well, I already said earlier, no less than Rush Limbaugh is still standing by his position that there will be no debate, which is why you guys got to tune in Monday. I might just go live Monday. You guys know that's pre-recorded. But if you see a notice that I'm going live in 15 minutes, I'm not promising, but it'll be because there's some landmark earth-shattering news here. So that's good, Tom, commenting on Martha. E, depends on your point of view. Well, yeah, I think that's true, Dr. J. Thank you, sir. That's good. All right, guys. Well, you know the rest from here. So if you forget my YouTube site, all you have to do is go to CB3 Financial and click on the little YouTube button. We just added that this last week, so you can find us there and all the playbacks here. I did another video for stock charts, your daily 5. It's different than what I'm doing for you guys, but check it out. We had almost 500 people watching that. It's a really big site, so I was honored to be asked to be a guest there, and I've been asked to be another guest on a different show on stock charts. So that's good too. Thank you guys for being part of this audience. If you're new to the program and you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. For the Thursday night show and Monday night, again, as I said, Monday night's usually pre-recorded. There will be times when I'll need to go live, and it might be before election night or might even be this next coming Monday. I'm definitely tweeting every day, sometimes twice a day. When some news comes out about this nomination, you can watch for something on Saturday evening for sure. But just hope you'll reach out and contact us if you got any questions. I had a couple people contact me this week about things that they've been watching the show and they just wanted to talk about some financial matters. You know I'm here for that. Doesn't cost you anything. If you're a client, certainly you're part of the process. And even if you're just a viewer and you have some questions, I'm happy to help you. This is what I do, okay? As I always close every show from 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, for we have not been given a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. And it is really something we need to count on as we head into what is going to be probably the most tumultuous last 39 days before any general election in any of our lifetimes. That said, it is my deeply held belief that we will not only survive this pandemic, this political process, these social unrest, we will emerge a stronger nation. And I'm going to add to that tonight and say, I believe 2021 will be the best year for this country in our lifetimes. Take that to the bank. Take that to the bank, guys, okay? Really appreciate you being here. Always do. Never take you for granted. If you've got any questions, you saw the ways you can contact me. Love to dialogue with people. We've got some new things on the horizon. I had a customer call me about, really getting concerned about inflation. I said, well, I'm going to address that, but I really need to wait till December until we get this election behind us. But we have some new concepts, some new educational materials, some new offerings that we'll be telling you more about. But until then, we have our hands full covering this election process and how it affects the markets and your investments. And that's our program for tonight, Thursday, September 24th. I'm Charles Brown, Portfolio Manager with CB3 Financial. From COVID to politics to the markets, this is CB3 Live.